I've arrived now at the Famine Graveyard. There's a little sign here. It's a fair old hike, I can tell you. So still walking up this boreen here, leading to the graveyard. I was just thinking to myself, it's hidden away from the rest of Callan. And it makes you wonder what kind of thinking these people had who run the country. No doubt ably assisted by some of the good burghers of Callan, that they could do this. And it brings to mind Oscar Wilde's Man and Socialism, where there's a piece in it where he says, talking about charity, and that the poor, this idea that the poor are always with us, and he said that he wanted the poor to rise up and not accept their situation. And you can understand why he said that. Something I think is quite correct, that nobody should ever be put in a position like this, where they end up in a pauper's grave with thousands of others, no names on their gravestones, nothing to commemorate those people. Except now I think there's an attempt to show what happened, but even looking at those plaques on the wall there, they haven't really been looked after well. The workhouse still looks a mess. And these poor people need to be remembered properly. There are obviously some good things happening, because otherwise I would never have found the place. So the town council has made all this accessible to visitors and so on, and to people to know some of their history. And I know things shouldn't be pristine and all the rest of it, but I think more could be done to look after the history of our country here. Just having a ramble, both literally and physically. We're here. It's taken a good half hour. Okay, I had a short stop, but I've walked quite quickly most of the way. This is it. This is what I was looking for yesterday, that little film I made about Callan. I was sent to the wrong graveyard, albeit fascinating. In memory of the uncounted victims of famine and poverty buried here, most of whom died in Callan workhouse, 1841 to 1922. So we know 3,315 died between the years 1845 to 1851 in the Callan workhouse. But so many more are buried here too. Uncounted victims of famine and poverty. And across the water, Sir Robert Peel, who Ruskin, I think it was, described as having a face like the fittings on a coffin. He was the man who refused more than anybody to do anything about the dire situation in Ireland. The laissez-faire politics would out, he said. What he did do, he sent Thomas Baring from Lewisham, where I used to work for 20 years, Baring Brothers, the bankers. He sent Thomas Baring out to America to buy Indian corn secretly so the price wouldn't rise on the market. It was brought back to Ireland to feed the poor. You would have thought a small act of mercy, but there was a deep, deep problem with it, a sting, which was this: Indian corn has to be milled twice before it's edible. They only ever milled it once. So what would happen is that people would be fed Indian corn and it would puncture their intestines. That was the level of care for the Irish that the British government had. Now, I don't blame ordinary British people for that, because we need ordinary workers to stand together against all sorts of injustice. But to think that 1 million people died in Ireland during the years of the so-called famine, and over 1 million emigrated to New York, other places along the east coast of the United States. And it's 9 million people, salutary tale this is, 9 million people lived in Ireland before 1845. And after the effects of the years of famine and hunger, there was less than 5 million. Less than, nearly half had left or died. And the population has never grown above 5 million since. We're going to have a look in there now. I can see a memorial stone, so we'll go and have a look. Some steps here. There's a beautiful memorial stone here. I'm going to read it out. And it names the countries in recent history who've suffered through hunger and famine. Starting with Ireland in 1845, Bangladesh 1974, East Timor 1975, Brazil 1979, Ethiopia 1984, Somalia 1992, Angola 1994. And there's a quote from Bramato, 1987. Bramato: famine is the closing scene of a drama whose most important and decisive acts have been played out behind closed doors. And it's dedicated to the memory of Callan's great famine victims, whose suffering continues amongst the poor of Asia, Africa and Latin America. Today, their memory challenges us to work for a more just and equitable world. Erected by the AFRIS, I think it is, Great Famine Project during the 150th anniversary of the death of Brother Edmund Rice, Good Friday 1994. Brother Edmund Rice was the person who founded the Christian Brothers and also the Presentation Brothers. And he was born near Callan, or in Callan. So I'm probably standing on the graves of all those people now. And they have a cross here. I mean, it's a Catholic country, and the dead are remembered by many people who are Catholics in this way. This looks like an altar. I would imagine there's some sort of ceremony here every year, or to commemorate the famine victims and all those who died in the workhouse. I can hardly believe it, to be honest. I mean, I live in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and it was then probably the wealthiest, Britain. And this was allowed to happen. I'm walking through to another part now. I think this must also be a graveyard. It's just a field with dandelions and daisies on it. In the shadow of the great mountain. And now just the singing of the birds I can hear. You can probably hear. I wonder if anybody alive today can trace back their forebears to the Callan workhouse. It's not that long ago. 1850, 1950, 2000, 150, 160 years ago. 2 lifetimes. Strange because there's no actual markings other than trees that have been planted. Just a few trees. And here there's a rock beneath a tree. Very powerful. Perhaps because it's not pristine and kept beautifully. There's something in the fact that nature has been allowed to close in on those bodies that lie beneath my feet now. Just hidden away. It's difficult, isn't it? I come as a visitor and it evokes powerful emotions. But if you live here on a day-to-day basis, it becomes part of your surroundings. And somebody like me can't expect people to be constantly in a somber state over it. But it is sad, really. It's still sad. That simple wooden cross. Very powerful stuff. What did W.B. Yeats say? A terrible beauty is born. Well, I'm glad that I've come, because I wondered about this place for a long time. Never had the time, or never worked the time out to come, get myself organised. hope I can bring some people here another time. I'm not sure even my cousins know where it is or have visited it. But that's getting into, really, that's none of my business, is it? You shan't moralise about things like that. People have their own lives and agendas. Okay. We'll just take one last look at this memorial. Somebody's left a milk bottle underneath it. My God. I don't know. Mind you, it could have blown there from somewhere, couldn't it? You don't know. I should ditch it somewhere. I don't know if you can see it. It's holy water, Our Lady of Knock. Please take this holy water to sprinkle it with care for those who lay to rest in the cherry field, and say a little prayer. And when you return to walk away, remember them with love, as they rest in the loving arms of Jesus in heaven above. Well, that's their view, but it's still a good thought. Our Lady of Knock, Queen of Ireland, bless and protect us with this holy water. That's interesting. I'll decline, but I'll be respectful. And that's the end. It's the 6th of May, 2011. And I've just visited what is called locally the Cherry Field, which is a mass grave for the thousands of people who died in the Callan workhouse between the years of 1841 and 1922. And in particular, during the years of the famine between 1845 to 1851, in that period alone, 3,315 people died of malnutrition in the workhouse in Callan. And they were disposed of in what you can see now, that field, the Cherry Field as it's now called. So, it's a precious place for Irish Catholics, the state religion. They have their view on it. But for me, it evokes anger and sadness for reasons that I've already said. That one of the world's wealthiest, if not the wealthiest nation in the world, allowed this to happen, as they say now, on its watch in Ireland. It was an occupying force. 800 years of an occupying force. This was probably one of its darkest moments. There we are. Another reason why I despise Toryism and the ruling class. And I'll add this, liberalism too, because let's be honest, nothing more than B-class Tories and certainly in the 19th century, the Whig tradition and the Liberal tradition was responsible for a lot of the tragedies that happened in other countries, like Ireland.